Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're getting into something pretty wild, the anatomy of a massive stock breakout. We're going to look at the data, the signals, and piece together the story of what happens when a totally quiet stock suddenly, well, screams for attention. So it all kicks off with this number right here. On December 1st, 2025, a little-known stock, QTTB, saw over 168 million of its shares change hands. And get this, that was in a single day. I mean, this wasn't just a busy day at the office. This was a full-blown explosion of activity that pretty much tore up the old script and started a completely new story for this stock. Okay, so that leads us to the big question, right? What on earth just happened here? How does a stock go from being, completely ignored, a wallflower, to suddenly being the center of the market's attention, literally overnight? And more importantly, what does it all mean? All right, to really get how this happened, we gotta rewind a bit. You know how they say it's the calm before the storm? Well, QTTB was basically the definition of that calm. Yeah, before this absolute eruption, QTTB was, well, it was a sleepy stock, a boring stock even. We're talking minimal volume, often trading less than 100,000 shares a day. It was just kind of moving sideways, doing nothing. It was in what the pros call a consolidation period. But look at this. The scale of the change is just, it's almost hard to believe. On November 28th, a measly 65,000 shares traded hands. The very next trading day, boom, over 168 million. That's not just an increase, you guys. That is a complete and total transformation. And it's not just me saying this. The source material for this whole analysis describes it perfectly. They called it a seismic, paradigm-altering shift. Love that phrase, because this really wasn't just a big day. It was an event that literally redrew the map for this stock's entire technical landscape. Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty. Let's dig into the primary evidence here, the volume itself. You gotta remember, volume is the fuel. It's the engine behind any major price move. So if we want to understand what happened, this is where we have to look. So our first big clue comes from an indicator called relative volume. It's a pretty simple but powerful tool. All it does is tell you how the current trading volume stacks up against its recent average. It's a fantastic way to spot something unusual. And on that day, QTTB's relative volume hit, wait for it, 46.40. Let that sink in for a second. That means it traded more than 46 times its normal average volume. This is the smoking gun. It confirms a massive sudden flood of interest from everyone. This is way, way beyond just typical market noise. Okay, next up, we've got on-balance volume, or OBV for short. Think of it like a running tally. It adds volume on days the stock goes up and subtracts it on days it goes down. It's kind of like measuring the tide of money flowing into or out of a stock. And for QTTB, the OBV went through the roof. It registered this huge positive number. So what does that tell us? It tells us that this monumental wave of volume was overwhelmingly driven by buying. Pure and simple. It backs up, it validates the huge price jump we saw. But just when you think the story is simple, right? Lots of buyers, price goes up, the end. Well, the data throws us a curveball. There's a fascinating contradiction here, and that's something you learn fast in the markets. It rarely gives you a story with just one side. So what we have here is a classic technical tug of war. On one side, you've got that OBV we just talked about, and it's screaming, buy, buy, buy. But on the other side, there's this other indicator called the accumulation/distribution line, or AD line, and it's flashing a major warning sign. See, this line is smart. It looks at why the stock closes within its daily price range to figure out if big money is actually buying or selling. And a big negative number here, well, that's a red flag. It hints that something else was going on just beneath the surface. And that AD line, it helps us answer a really critical question. If the buying was so insane, so strong, then why did the stock close so far off its high? I mean, it hit a peak of $6.37, but it ended the day way down at $3.82. That's a huge gap. So where did all that selling come from? The answer is right there in that disagreement between the two indicators. That negative AD line is a classic sign of something called distribution. It's a fancy term, but the idea is simple. It suggests that while, the public and smaller traders were all rushing in, excitedly buying and pushing the price higher and higher, some of the bigger, maybe more informed investors were quietly selling into that excitement. They were using all that buying as an opportunity to get out. Okay, so let's recap. We have this absolutely massive volume, a huge price move, but we also have this pretty significant warning sign hiding in the data. So what happened next? What was the immediate aftermath? Did this whole crazy event actually forge a new path for the stock? Well, here's the thing. Despite that internal weakness we just talked about, the data is pretty clear on one thing. A new uptrend was absolutely, decisively established. You can see the price is now way above its key moving averages, and a bunch of classic trend indicators, they all flipped green. They all started signaling that a new trend was officially in motion. Just look at this table. The ADX, which basically measures how strong a trend is, has crossed into trending territory. But the real story is the gap between the plus DI and the minus DI. The plus DI shows buying pressure, minus DI shows selling pressure. And look at that separation. That is a huge, powerful signal that the buyers are in complete control of the price right now. The sellers, they've been totally pushed to the sidelines. All right, let's put all the puzzle pieces together. We've got immense buying pressure, we've got a clear new uptrend, but we've also got that worrying signal of some sneaky selling going on under the hood. So what's the final verdict here? What does our analysis tell us? Here it is, step 1. The verdict is that a powerful new bullish trend has, without a doubt, been established for QTB. The evidence for that is just overwhelming. But, and this is a big but, step 2 is the warning. The analysis also flags a really serious internal weakness. That disagreement, that bearish divergence we saw, you can't ignore it. So it's a bullish picture for sure, but one with a huge asterisk next to it. And that leaves us with one final, and maybe the most important thought. What this whole story with QTTB really shows us is that looking at the market isn't about finding a simple, clean answer. It's about seeing the mess, understanding the complexities, and learning to ask the right questions. So when the data tells you two completely different stories at the same time, which one do you listen to?